Imagine a tractor powered by a screaming jet engine, a farm machine running on hydrogen fuel cells decades before anyone thought it was possible. A tractor with a heater, radio, and cigarette lighter, when most farmhouses didn't even have electricity. Brilliant engineers once built farm machines so far ahead of their time that farmers literally didn't know what to do with them. Most failed, most were forgotten. But every single one secretly shaped the tractors you see today. Here are 25. Number 25. The Minneapolis-Moline UDLX Comfortractor. Let's start with the tractor that was so weird, so luxurious, and so far ahead of its time that farmers literally refused to buy it. In 1938, Minneapolis-Moline rolled out a machine called the UDLX Comfortractor, and it shocked everybody at the 1938 farm show in front of 12,000 farmers. Here's what made it insane. This thing had a fully enclosed cab, the first factory-built enclosed cab on any farm tractor in the world. It had a heater, it had a radio, it had a cigarette lighter, it had an ashtray, windshield wipers, a speedometer, a clock, a sun visor, and even a rear-view mirror. Inside was a passenger seat, so the farmer's wife could ride along to town in comfort. It was painted bright prairie gold with chromed bumpers and hubcaps, and it could hit 40 miles per hour on the highway thanks to a 283 cubic inch four-cylinder engine producing 46 horsepower and a 5-speed synchronized transmission. You literally worked the field all day and then drove into town for dinner. Sounds amazing, right? Well, it cost $2,155 in 1938. That was the same price as a brand new Cadillac. A regular Minneapolis-Moline Model U cost about $1,000. A 1938 Ford Deluxe sedan cost $725. Farmers were still clawing their way out of the Great Depression and had absolutely zero interest in paying Cadillac money for a tractor. Only about 125 UDLXs were ever built before production stopped in 1941. Today, maybe 30 to 40 survive, and they're considered the holy grail of tractor collecting. But here's the crazy part. It would take nearly 30 more years before manufacturers seriously tried putting cabs on tractors again. The UDLX was right. The world just wasn't ready. And get this, driving the UDLX was a full adventure. To get inside, you had to enter through the rear door, climb over the rear power takeoff, which spun just inches from your leg while driving. Wedge yourself between the engine, transmission, and rear axle, then unfold the passenger jump seat for your wife. When you were pulling an implement, you had to keep the back door open the whole time so you could access the levers or the trip rope. It was bizarre, uncomfortable, and brilliant all at once. Minneapolis-Moline's marketing team had pitched it as the way to keep young people on the farm, a tractor so fun and luxurious that farm kids wouldn't want to move to the city. It didn't work. Young people still moved to the city, but the UDLX proved something critical, that farmers, just like car drivers, deserved comfort, weather protection, and modern conveniences. That idea eventually won out, just 30 years late. Number 24. The Massey Harris Model 20 Self-Propelled Combine. Before 1938, harvesting wheat needed a tractor, a trailed combine, and a whole crew of men. Then an Australian engineer named Tom Carroll did something that shouldn't have worked. He started work at Massey Harris's Canadian Engineering Centre in 1936, and within 2 years, 8 pre-production prototypes were shipped to Argentina for testing. What he built was the Massey Harris Model 20, the world's first commercially successful self-propelled combine harvester. This was a 16-foot-wide monster with a Chrysler engine sitting right on the chassis. One person, just one, could drive into a field and cut, thresh, and clean the grain in a single pass. No separate tractor, no extra crew. The header was up front. The driver sat above it with perfect visibility, and the steering wheels were in the rear. Over 2 years of production, Massey Harris sold 925 of these big MH-20s. That doesn't sound like a lot, but consider what happened during World War II. Because the Model 20 and its successor, the Model 21, let one person do the work of 5 or 6, Massey Harris got special permission to build what they called the Harvest Brigade, a fleet of combines that swept from the southern states all the way north, saving the American harvest while the boys were overseas fighting. Today, every combine you see rolling across a wheat field is a direct descendant of Tom Carroll's invention. The Henry Ford Museum still displays a 1938 Model 20, and the American Society of Agricultural Engineers officially designated it a landmark of agricultural engineering. But let me put the Harvest Brigade in perspective, because this is one of the most incredible untold stories of American farming. During World War II, the U.S. was losing millions of young men to the draft, just as food production demand was exploding to feed Allied troops. The traditional wheat harvest, which needed massive crews, was facing collapse. Massey Harris, being a Canadian company operating in the U.S., pitched an idea to the War Food Administration: build 500 special Model 21 combines, sell them to farmers willing to follow the harvest from Texas to Canada, and save the wheat crop. The government approved it. In 1944 and 1945, that Harvest Brigade of Massey Harris self-propelled combines saved an estimated 25 million bushels of wheat that would have otherwise rotted in the field. It may be the single most important wartime agricultural innovation in North American history, and almost nobody talks about it anymore. By the end of the decade, the Model 21 was selling over 10,000 units a year, and trailed combines that used to be pulled behind tractors were essentially obsolete. Number 23. The Allis-Chalmers Model B. In 1937, Allis-Chalmers Tractor Division Manager Harry Merritt looked at farm census data and noticed something nobody else cared about. Out of nearly 7 million farms in America, about 4 million were 100 acres or smaller, and they were all still using horses. Why? Because tractors were too big and too expensive. So Merritt ordered his engineer Walter Strello to build a tractor nobody was building: a small, light, cheap tractor that could still pull a plow. They brought in industrial designer Brooks Stevens to style it, and what came out was the Allis-Chalmers Model B. It was painted bright Persian orange, a color inspired by California poppies, and it sold for less than $500. That's right, less than $500. That was unheard of. The original Model B had a Waukesha 113 cubic inch four-cylinder engine, later replaced by Allis-Chalmers' own 116 cubic inch engine. It produced about 13 horsepower at the drawbar, but it had another secret weapon: a patented torque tube that held the drive shaft in a narrow housing, which meant the driver could actually see the cultivator hose down between the rows. Other companies had to pay Allis-Chalmers royalties to use similar designs. Over 120,000 Model Bs were built between 1937 and 1957 at the West Allis, Wisconsin plant. Within months of its launch, every tractor company had to create a $500 class to compete. Allis-Chalmers jumped from 4% of the market in 1929 to the third largest tractor maker in America by 1939. The little orange tractor that was too small to matter ended up forcing every farmer in America to reconsider what mechanization could look like. And here's another detail most people don't know. The Model B was so versatile that Allis-Chalmers eventually built specialty variants for niche markets. There was the Asparagus B with high clearance for asparagus harvesting. There was the Potato Special with a narrower track for potato rows. There was the IB industrial version with fixed axles, often sold as a mower for parks, golf courses, and road maintenance. Mail carriers in rural areas even bought Model Bs and actually delivered mail to their neighbors with them before heading out to till their fields. The Model B also spawned the Model C and eventually the Model CA, which added a 4-speed transmission, live PTO, and power-adjustable rear wheels, features that finally killed off the B in 1957 after 19 years of production. But the Brooks Stevens styling, the orange paint, and the philosophy of making a tractor small enough and cheap enough for the average family farmer, that all carried forward into every compact utility tractor you see rolling around a hobby farm today. Number 22. The Ford-Ferguson 9N with the 3-point hitch. Okay, technically this one launched in October 1939, but it became the dominant machine of the 1940s, and you cannot talk about forgotten game changers without it. Before 1939, a farmer attaching a plow to a tractor was doing something dangerous. Plows were towed behind on wheels. If the plow hit a buried rock, the tractor could literally flip backwards on top of you. Hundreds of farmers died this way. An Irish engineer named Harry Ferguson had been working on a solution since the 1910s. By 1926, he'd patented a hydraulic 3-point hitch, a linkage system that made the tractor and implement work as one machine, with the plow depth automatically adjusting based on soil conditions. In 1938, Through mutual friend Eber Sherman, Ferguson demonstrated it for Henry Ford on the lawn of Ford's Dearborn estate. Ford was so impressed that he and Ferguson sealed a deal with a handshake, no written contract. The result was the Ford-Ferguson 9N, the first American-made production tractor with a 3-point hitch and a rear PTO. About 99,000 9Ns were built between 1939 and 1942, and when the improved 8N came out in 1947, it sold over 530,000 units, making it the best-selling individual tractor in North American history at the time. But here's where it went sideways. When Henry Ford II took over in 1945, he killed the handshake deal and launched the 8N without Ferguson. Ferguson sued for $251 million in patent infringement, eventually settling in 1952 for $9.25 million. Ferguson then merged with Massey Harris to form Massey Ferguson. Today, virtually every tractor on Earth uses some form of the 3-point hitch. Harry Ferguson didn't just improve tractors, he completely rewrote the rules. And the story gets even more fascinating when you look at how Ferguson responded. Even before the lawsuit was settled, he had already set up parallel production in England at the Banner Lane factory in Coventry. Starting in 1946, Ferguson built what became known as the Little Grey Fergie, the TE-20, and over 500,000 of them were built through 1956. In America, he built the nearly identical TE-20 starting in 1948. These small, frugal, beautifully engineered tractors mechanized countless small farms and orchards around the world. Many are still running today in orchards, vineyards, and hobby farms from New Zealand to Norway. Meanwhile, the Ford 8N kept selling. In 1952, a brand new Ford 8N cost $1,404, significantly less than the Farmall H's $2,000, and that price advantage combined with the 3-point hitch is what made it North America's best-selling individual tractor of all time. Two tractors that should have been built together by two men who sealed a deal with a handshake. Instead, their rivalry accidentally mechanized the entire world. Number 21. The International Harvester H10H Cotton Picker. On October 2, 1942, on a farm near Clarksdale, Mississippi, International Harvester unveiled a machine that would change the American South forever. It was called the H10H, and it was a cotton picker mounted on a Farmall Model H tractor. It was the world's first commercially viable mechanical cotton picker. For over 100 years, cotton had been picked by hand, a brutal, back-breaking job that defined the economy of the South. The Rust brothers, John Daniel and Mac, had invented a working mechanical picker in the 1930s, eventually earning 47 patents, but they never had the money to mass-produce it. International Harvester did. They'd spent $5.25 million and over 2 decades developing their machine. Chief engineer C.R. Hagan had led the team since 1940. The secret was the barbed, moistened spindles. Inside the picking unit, hundreds of rotating spindles would snag open cotton fibers and pull them off the bowl. Rubber doffers stripped the cotton off the spindles, and an air system blew it into a basket on top. One machine could replace up to 40 hand laborers. A prototype called Old Red, the 25th of just 30 machines built in 1943, picked 8,000 bales of cotton before being retired in 1959, and it's now at the Smithsonian. Full production didn't start until 1947, when IH opened their new Memphis plant. But the impact was seismic. The mechanical cotton picker was one of the biggest drivers of the Great Migration, permanently ending the sharecropper economy of the Cotton Belt. And here's the human story behind the machine that often gets forgotten. John Daniel Rust, the original inventor of the spindle picker, was actually a socialist who feared his own invention. He knew that mechanizing cotton would displace millions of sharecroppers, mostly African American, and create a massive humanitarian crisis. He and his brother Mac had even vowed not to sell their machines to planters who would use them to exploit labor, and they planned to use any profits to help displaced workers. The Jackson Daily News in Mississippi even editorialized that the Rust machine should be driven right out of the cotton fields and sunk into the Mississippi River. But William E. Ayres, head of the Delta Experiment Station, had a different view. He wrote to Rust, "Lincoln emancipated the Southern Negro. It remains for cotton harvesting machinery to emancipate the Southern cotton planter." The story is deeply tragic. By the late 1940s, International Harvester's machines were rolling out across the Cotton Belt, displacing workers by the millions. The Great Migration sent those workers north to Chicago, Detroit, and St. Louis, forever reshaping American cities. The mechanical cotton picker didn't just change agriculture, it changed the demographic map of the United States. Number 20. The Farmall Cub. When International Harvester introduced the Farmall Cub in 1947, it didn't look like much. It was tiny. It only made 9.25 horsepower. It had a 60 cubic inch 4-cylinder engine and a 69-inch wheelbase. But it did something no big tractor could. It made mechanization cheap enough for the smallest farms in America. It sold for $545 in 1947. The Cub had a secret weapon called Cultivision. The engine was offset 8 inches to the left while the driver's seat and steering wheel sat on the right. That meant a farmer cultivating vegetable rows could look straight down and actually see the cultivator teeth between the plants. You could weed corn rows or vegetable beds with surgical precision, something that would have been impossible on a big tractor. The Cub was built in Louisville, Kentucky, in the factory IH bought from Curtiss-Wright Aircraft after World War II. Production ran all the way until 1979, an incredible 32-year run, and over 245,000 Cubs rolled off the assembly line. It became arguably the most popular small tractor in history, and thousands of them are still working on small farms today, pushing snow, mowing yards, and cultivating gardens just like they did 70 years ago. What made the Cub even more special was the IH implement ecosystem. International Harvester designed more than 100 implements specifically for the Cub: plows, harrows, cultivators, planters, grader blades, sickle bar mowers, rakes, wagons, manure spreaders, and belly mowers. Adding 1948's touch control hydraulic system meant a farmer could lift these implements with a single lever while sitting in the seat. Electric starters became available in 1950. The Cub's demo program in 1950 even included a small run of white-painted tractors, serial numbers 99,356 to 106,516, that dealers used to show off the tractor's capabilities before repainting them red for sale. In 1955, IH introduced the Lowboy Cub, a lowered version with a shortened 62.5-inch wheelbase that was perfect for mowing. In 1964, production shifted toward the yellow and white Cub. In France, IH built a Super Cub at their Saint-Dizier factory. The little red Cub that nobody expected to survive ended up being IH's longest-running tractor ever, outlasting the entire Farmall brand itself. Number 19. The John Deere Model R. In 1949, after more than a decade of research and development, John Deere released its very first diesel tractor, the Model R, and it was a monster. Sold for $3,700 and built at the Waterloo, Iowa works. It was the most powerful and fuel-efficient tractor in America at the time. What made it truly weird was that it had 2 engines. Yes, 2. The main engine was a massive 416 cubic inch 2-cylinder diesel, producing 43 horsepower at the drawbar and 48 horsepower on the belt, with a 16:1 compression ratio. The problem with diesels back then was that they were almost impossible to start in cold weather. Deere's solution was brilliant. They strapped a small 2-cylinder gasoline pony engine onto the side. You'd start the pony motor electrically, let it warm up, and its exhaust gases preheated the diesel's intake air while its cooling system warmed the diesel block. Once things were warm, you pulled a lever and the diesel fired up. The Model R was also the first John Deere with a live independent PTO that had its own clutch, plus live hydraulics running at 1,800 psi. It could haul 6,644 pounds in low gear and hit 11.5 miles per hour in fifth. Over 21,000 were built in 5 years, and the Model R marked the end of Deere's lettered tractor series. From that point on, they used numbers. This is the tractor that dragged John Deere into the modern diesel age, and the Model R's Live PTO was actually one of its most revolutionary features, even more than the diesel engine. Before the Model R, most tractors had transmission-driven PTOs, which meant when you pushed in the clutch, the PTO stopped spinning too. That was a problem for implements like hay balers, manure spreaders, or combines that needed to keep running even when the tractor wasn't moving. The Model R solved this with a separate clutch for the PTO, controlled by its own lever. You could stop the tractor without stopping the baler. You could keep the combine running while backing up. Deere's Powertrol hydraulic system also let the operator lift implements by pulling a lever, no more cranking or dismounting. At the same time, diesel fuel was significantly cheaper than gasoline in 1949, making the Model R the most fuel-efficient tractor available. Those combined features made it the favorite of wheatland farmers with thousands of acres, and it set the standard for every heavy farm tractor that came after it. When the Model R was replaced in 1955 by the John Deere 80, and then the 820 in 1956, and the 830 in 1959, each one was just an evolutionary refinement of the original Model R formula. Number 18. The International TD9 Track Tractor. While everyone else was obsessed with wheeled tractors, International Harvester was quietly building something else: crawlers. In 1940, they rolled out the TD9 tractor, replacing the older unstyled T35 series. This was a diesel-powered track tractor designed to tackle the toughest soil on Earth. The TD9 ran a 335 cubic inch four-cylinder diesel engine, governed at 1,400 RPM, producing about 44 belt horsepower. It used a unique starting system. It would crank up on gasoline first, then switch over to diesel once the engine was warm. It had a 5-speed transmission and competed head-to-head with the Caterpillar D4, which ran a smaller 312 cubic inch diesel. What made the TD9 advanced for its time wasn't the specs, it was what it enabled. Farmers in Canada and the northern Great Plains were facing soil compaction from heavy two-wheel drive tractors sinking into heavy clay gumbo soil. The TD9's tracks distributed weight over a much larger area, stopping compaction and allowing farming in conditions where wheels would fail. After World War II, many surplus military TD9s ended up on farms in the Red River Valley, saving thousands of acres from becoming unworkable. International built the TD9 for 16 straight years, a testament to just how ahead of its time the design was. Number 17. The Allis-Chalmers Roto-Baler. In 1910, a Nebraska farmer named Umo Lueben patented the idea of a round hay bale. His concept: gather hay, roll it into a big round bundle, tie it, and eject it from the machine, sat dormant for 30 years. Then in 1940, he sold the rights to Allis-Chalmers, who finally turned it into a working product, the Roto-Baler, introduced in 1947. Here's the crazy part. In the 1940s, square bales were the standard. Every baler made small, tightly wrapped square or rectangular bales you stacked by hand. Round bales seemed insane. They rolled, they were hard to stack in a barn, and nobody knew what to do with them. But Allis-Chalmers pushed forward anyway. Within 3 years, they sold 23,000 roto-balers. The machine wasn't perfect. The bales were small compared to modern rounds, and farmers still preferred squares for indoor storage. For decades, round baling stayed a niche technology. But then in the late 1960s and 1970s, a research team at Iowa State University built the first big round baler, and suddenly every field in America was dotted with giant round bales weighing half a ton each. Today, most hay producers use round bales because they're faster to make and easier to move with a tractor. The Allis-Chalmers Roto-Baler was the seed. It took 30 years for the rest of the farming world to catch up to what Lueben and Allis-Chalmers knew in 1947. Number 16. The Wagner TR-14 Articulated Four-Wheel Drive Tractor. In 1954, in Portland, Oregon, 7 brothers named Wagner did something nobody else had successfully done. They built the first practical four-wheel drive articulated tractor, a tractor that bent in the middle to turn. Elmer Wagner had started experimenting back in 1949 with ideas he brought home from seeing European machines after World War II. The Wagner brothers, Bill, Guy, Eddie, Walt, Harold, Irvin, and Elmer, plus partner J. Burke Long, formed Wagner Tractor Company in Portland, and by 1955 were in full tractor production, calling their machines tractor-mobiles. In 1956, they introduced 3 models: the TR6 at 105 horsepower, the TR9 at 120 horsepower, and the TR-14 at 150 horsepower, all powered by Cummins diesels. What made them revolutionary was the patented PowerFlex coupling. It allowed the tractor to articulate up to 20 inches between the front and rear, while still delivering full power to all 4 tires. On steep hilly ground, where rear-wheel drive tractors would lose traction and slide backwards, the Wagner would just walk right up and keep pulling. In 1956, John Deere actually tested a Wagner TR-9 against a modified Case LA in front of their own president. On flat ground, they performed similarly. But when the Wagner pointed uphill, it pulled a 24-foot chisel plow right over the top. The Case slid back down. In 1968, John Deere signed a secret contract with Wagner to have them build WA-14 and WA-17 tractors under the Deere name, and included a 5-year no-compete clause that killed Wagner in the farm market. But every big four-wheel drive articulated tractor working today traces its DNA back to those Oregon brothers. In 1961, the company was purchased by FWD Corporation of Clintonville, Wisconsin, and rebranded as FWD Wagner. The paint changed from orange to yellow, model numbers got a WA prefix instead of TR, and a new line was introduced, the WA4, WA6, WA9, WA14, WA17, and the massive WA24 with 300 horsepower. The key to all Wagner tractors was the patented POW-R-Flex coupling, which allowed the articulated joint to oscillate up to 20 inches while still transferring full engine power to all 4 tires. That was a genuine engineering breakthrough in 1954. But what really killed Wagner wasn't John Deere, it was timing. When the contract ended and Wagner was allowed to sell tractors again, their own dealers had already moved on. Some of those dealers, refusing to be left without a tractor to sell, started building their own. The Wright tractor and the Big Bud were both born directly from ex-Wagner dealers in Montana. So in a way, Wagner's legacy is everywhere in the big four-wheel drive tractor market, even if the Wagner name itself is barely remembered outside collector circles. Number 15. The Allis-Chalmers Fuel Cell Tractor. Now we get to the stuff that will absolutely blow your mind. On October 15, 1959, Allis-Chalmers engineers drove a tractor out onto the company-owned golf course just outside West Allis, Wisconsin, and plowed a field of alfalfa with a double-bottom plow. That doesn't sound impressive until you hear how the tractor was powered. It ran on a hydrogen fuel cell. In 1959, Allis-Chalmers had started fuel cell research in 1951. Engineer Harry Carl Ehrich developed an alkaline fuel cell based on the work of British engineer Francis Thomas Bacon. The experimental tractor was built on a modified D12 chassis and was loaded with 1,008 individual fuel cells arranged in 4 banks. Each cell was about 1/4 inch thick, 12 inches square, and produced roughly 1 volt. Combined, they produced 15 kilowatts of electricity, which powered a 20 horsepower DC electric motor. The tractor ran primarily on propane, which supplied the hydrogen-rich gas the fuel cells needed. No gasoline, no diesel, no emissions, no moving parts in the power source. The tractor ran, in Allis's own words, without a whisper. It could haul 3,000 pounds and was the largest operational fuel cell vehicle in the world at the time. 7 years before GM's famous 1966 Electrovan, which is usually called the first fuel cell vehicle, Allis-Chalmers already had a working fuel cell tractor. Allis later used their fuel cell tech for NASA's space program, and parts they made ended up on the Saturn V rocket and on the surface of the moon. The tractor itself was donated to the Smithsonian. Today, New Holland is finally producing fuel cell tractors as if it's some new idea. Allis-Chalmers got there 67 years earlier. Number 14. The International Harvester HT340 Turbine Tractor. This might be the craziest farm machine ever built. In July 1961, at the University of Nebraska's 10th annual Tractor Day in Lincoln, International Harvester wheeled out a tractor that looked like a 1960s concept car on farm tires. They called it the HT340. HT stood for Hydrostatic Turbine, because this thing had 2 genuinely futuristic technologies. The first was a hydrostatic drive, no gears, no clutch. Instead, the engine drove a variable displacement hydraulic pump, which powered 2 radial hydraulic motors, 1 at each rear wheel. The operator controlled speed and direction with a single lever. The second technology was even wilder. The HT340's engine was a gas turbine, a real actual jet engine. IH had bought the Solar Aircraft Company in 1960 specifically to develop turbines, and they dropped one of Solar's aircraft turbines right into this tractor. It spun at 57,000 RPM. The engine and gear reduction together weighed only 90 pounds and produced 85 horsepower. That's an insane power-to-weight ratio. The downsides: it was deafeningly loud, and it drank fuel at an unbelievable rate. A modern replica consumes a gallon of jet fuel every 5 minutes. On the way back from its Nebraska debut, a bird flew into the transport truck's windshield. The truck crashed, and the tractor was severely damaged. IH rebuilt it as the HT-341 in 1962 and later donated it to the Smithsonian in 1967. But here's the real legacy. The turbine never went anywhere, but the hydrostatic drive did. In 1967, IH launched the 656 Hydro, the first production hydrostatic tractor. Today, almost every riding lawnmower in America uses hydrostatic drive. The HT-340 was a failure that quietly won the future. The HT-340 story has one more twist that makes it even more incredible. In 1960, IH purchased the Solar Aircraft Company of San Diego specifically to develop gas turbines. And Solar's engineers worked with exotic materials like beryllium, titanium, refractory metals, and superalloys in air-conditioned hospital clean rooms. IHC leadership was convinced turbines were the future of trucks, tractors, and construction equipment. They even named IHC's turbines Titan, a nod to an earlier IHC tractor name. Solar's turbines ended up being used on the Saturn V rocket and on the surface of the Moon. Yes, parts of a farm tractor company's engines ended up on the lunar surface. Solar was eventually sold to help keep IHC afloat in its final days, and today it exists as Solar Turbines, a wholly owned subsidiary of Caterpillar, making industrial gas turbines for natural gas pipelines and power plants. Meanwhile, the original HT-340 was damaged beyond full repair. The rebuilt HT-341 lives at the Smithsonian, a replica built by retired GM machinist Brian Harris. Over 2,600 hours of work, sold at Meckham's auction in 2019 for $75,600 and again in 2022 for $154,350. The craziest farm tractor ever built had a second life and a direct line from a Montana cornfield to the surface of the Moon. Number 13. The Minneapolis-Moline Unitractor Unisystem. In the early 1950s, Minneapolis-Moline introduced something so radical that farmers nicknamed it the Minneapolis-Moline motorcycle. It was called the Unitractor, and it was a three-wheeled power unit designed to be a universal chassis. The concept was way ahead of its time. Instead of owning separate machines, a tractor, a combine, a forage harvester, a corn picker, you'd buy one Unitractor power unit and bolt on whatever attachment you needed for the season. The sales pitch was literally all in one. The Unitractor had a 3.4-liter four-cylinder gasoline engine, power steering, and a mechanical continuously variable transmission. Its attachments included the Uni-Harvester combine and the Uni-Foragor forage harvester. This concept eventually evolved into the Unifarmer and the MM700 Unisystem. And here's where it gets interesting. The New Idea company later licensed the design to build the New Idea Uni-Harvester. But the broader farming world, they hated it. Farmers were used to owning dedicated machines, and nobody wanted to mess around with swapping a 500-pound attachment every 6 weeks. Sales were tiny. But think about this. Modern farm machinery companies are now building modular systems where a single power unit can run multiple attachments via ISOBus and quick connect hydraulics. Startups are building autonomous universal power platforms today. Minneapolis-Moline had the concept right in 1950. Everyone just laughed. Number 12. The Oliver 70 and the Oliver 8080. When Oliver released the Oliver 70 in 1935 and continued it through the 1940s, they did something no other tractor maker had done. They treated a tractor like a car. The Oliver 70 had a streamlined full-body hood, a radiator grille, fingertip controls, and a proper dashboard. It was powered by a 6-cylinder Waukesha Oliver engine designed to run on 70-octane gasoline. That's where the 70 in its name came from. It had a 4-speed transmission in row crop form or a 6-speed in standard form, giving it a top road speed of 14 mph. You could order it with an electric starter and electric lights. In 1937, Oliver held a contest at county fairs to pick the tractor's paint scheme. Voters chose green with red trim. At the kickoff parade in Charles City, Iowa, 6 of the prettiest young ladies in the Oliver organization drove 6 different color combinations in a 2-mile parade. Then, in 1948, Oliver launched its Fleetline series, the Oliver 66, 77, and 88, with fully enclosed engine compartments and clean aerodynamic styling that influenced Farmall and John Deere for decades. The Oliver 88, launched in 1948, became the first mass-produced American tractor with an independent live PTO. Despite all this innovation, Oliver got outsold by the simpler, cheaper Ford 9N. Oliver kept innovating. They led the industry in diesel tractor sales throughout the 1950s, but they never regained their lead. In 1960, White Motor Corporation bought Oliver, and by 1976, Oliver tractors stopped being made. A brand that styled tractors like automobiles got forgotten because style wasn't what sold in rural America. Number 11. The International Harvester MD Row Crop Diesel. In 1941, International Harvester did something John Deere wouldn't do for another 8 years. They put a diesel engine into a row crop tractor. It was called the Farmall MD, and it was the first row crop diesel tractor ever built in America. Before this, diesels were only available in big industrial crawlers or Wheatland standard tread tractors. The idea of a diesel row crop tractor, something small and maneuverable enough to cultivate corn between rows, seemed insane. Diesels were heavy, they were hard to start. Farmers were suspicious, but IH pushed through. The MD used a clever 2-stage starting system. It would crank up on gasoline with a compression-reducing valve open on the diesel cylinders, and once warm, the operator would flip a lever that closed the valve and switch to diesel fuel. Instant diesel start. No pony motor needed, no ether. It produced about 26 horsepower at the drawbar and pulled 3 plow configurations. John Deere didn't offer a diesel row crop until the mid-1950s. Ford didn't make a diesel row crop standard until the 1960s. IH's MD was the seed for an entire revolution. Today, almost every large tractor in the world is diesel-powered, and almost all of them are row crop capable. But the Farmall MD, the one that started it all, is practically forgotten by anyone outside hardcore collector circles. Number 10. The Minneapolis-Moline Model U. In 1938, the same year they released the UDLX Comfortractor, Minneapolis-Moline did something else nobody noticed at the time. They became the first company in the world to build a farm tractor that ran on LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, or propane. The regular Minneapolis-Moline Model U was available in a propane version, giving farmers a third fuel option alongside gasoline and kerosene distillate. At the time, propane was cheap, clean-burning, and produced fewer engine deposits than gasoline. It was also safer to store on a farm than gasoline. The innovation went almost unnoticed. It would take until the 1950s before LPG tractors became mainstream, with companies like Oliver, Case, and Allis-Chalmers offering propane versions across their lineups. By the 1960s, LPG tractors were incredibly popular in cotton-growing states like Texas and California, where propane was abundant. At its peak, over 20% of new tractors sold were LPG-powered. Then gasoline prices crashed and diesel efficiency improved, and LPG tractors quietly disappeared. But the idea of alternative fuel farm equipment, propane, natural gas, biodiesel, electric, hydrogen, that's all still being pursued today. Minneapolis-Moline was the first to prove it could work, with the first self-starter tractor too, back in 1938. Number 9. The Farmall Super MTA. The Super MTA, introduced by International Harvester in 1954, did something that other tractor companies wouldn't catch up to for years. It had a torque amplifier, essentially a 2-speed shift-on-the-fly transmission system. A farmer could pull back on a lever and instantly cut his ground speed in half while the engine kept running at the same RPM, meaning you could suddenly get more pulling power without stopping to downshift. This was revolutionary. Before this, if you hit a tough spot while plowing, you had to stop the tractor, push in the clutch, downshift, and start moving again, losing momentum and wasting time. The TA let you just slap a lever and keep going. The Super MTA produced 46 horsepower at the PTO from a 264 cubic inch gasoline engine and became one of the most prized Farmall tractors ever. The torque amplifier concept has now evolved into modern power shift and CVT transmissions on every high-end tractor. But in 1954, it was witchcraft. Number 8. The John Deere 8010. In 1959, John Deere tried to out-Wagner. They introduced the Model 8010, their first four-wheel drive articulated tractor, and it was an absolute giant. It weighed 20,000 pounds. It had a six-cylinder 425 cubic inch Detroit diesel engine producing 215 horsepower. It could run at 7 miles per hour, pulling a custom 8-bottom plow weighing 5,000 pounds. The 8010 was also a complete disaster. It had transmission problems. It had hydraulic problems. It was built in tiny numbers, fewer than 100 total between the 8010 and the improved 8020. Farmers didn't want something that big yet, and Deere's own dealer network wasn't equipped to service it. But Deere learned. They kept iterating. In 1971, they released the 7020, which worked. Then the 8630, 8640, and onward. Today, the John Deere 9RX series produces over 800 horsepower and is the direct descendant of that failed 1959 experiment. The 8010 didn't die. It just took 12 years to be reborn correctly. Number 7. The International Harvester 1026 Hydro. Remember the HT340 turbine tractor from earlier? Its hydrostatic drive technology didn't die. In 1967, 6 years after the HT340 was unveiled, International Harvester released the Farmall 656 Hydro, the world's first production tractor with hydrostatic transmission. And in 1971, they released the 1026 Hydro, one of the most powerful hydrostatic tractors ever produced for the row crop market. Hydrostatic drive meant no gears and no clutch. You just pushed a lever forward to go faster, pulled it back to go slower or reverse. The operator could maintain a constant engine RPM critical for PTO-driven equipment while infinitely varying ground speed. For operations like baling, combining, or loader work, this was a total game changer. Farmers initially hated it. It was more expensive, it was more complex, and it guzzled more fuel than a gear-drive tractor doing the same work. IH promoted it heavily at farm shows to try to convince skeptical farmers. But outside of loader work and specialty applications, it never became the dominant technology in big tractors. However, hydrostatic drive became the standard on smaller machines. Almost every riding mower, compact tractor, and skid steer loader on Earth today uses hydrostatic drive. The HT340's legacy lives on every time you fire up a zero-turn mower. Number 6. The versatile D100. In 1966, a Winnipeg, Canada company called Versatile launched the D100, their first four-wheel drive articulated tractor. It didn't look like much. It weighed just 14,000 pounds, which was less than most of its competitors. It had a Ford Industrial 363 cubic inch six-cylinder diesel engine producing 100 horsepower, or a Chrysler gasoline version with similar output. It had a 4-speed transmission with a 4-speed transfer case, giving 12 forward speeds. But here's what made Versatile's D100 revolutionary. While Wagner and John Deere were making massive 250 horsepower behemoths that cost $25,000, Versatile priced the D100 affordably enough that medium-sized prairie farms could actually buy one. In 1967, they sold over $1,000. Versatile quickly became the first company to mass-produce articulated 4WD tractors. At their peak, they controlled 70% of the 4WD tractor market in North America. They democratized a technology that had been stuck as a niche luxury product. Today, Versatile is owned by Baler and still makes articulated tractors, but hardly anyone outside of the Canadian prairies remembers that they're the company that made four-wheel drive farming affordable. Number 5. The Heston Stackhand. In 1973, a company called Heston out of Kansas launched one of the most imaginative hay machines ever built. It was called the Stackhand, and it made huge rectangular self-compacted hay stacks directly in the field. Traditional balers made square bales. Round balers made big round bales. The Stackhand did something else entirely. You'd drive it through a windrow of cut hay, and it would pick up the hay, blow it into a large chamber, and then hydraulically compact it. When full, the operator would hit a button, and a massive 1-ton or 3-ton rectangular stack of hay would slide right out onto the ground. No twine, no wire, just a self-supporting compressed stack that could sit in the field until needed. The stack and was perfect for large cattle operations in the Great Plains. You didn't have to store hay in a barn. You didn't have to move small bales. You drove out with a stack mover, another Heston machine, picked up a stack, and hauled it to where your cows were. It was brilliant. It was ahead of its time, and it lost. Small square and round bales were easier to move long distances, stored better for the horse hay market, and integrated with existing tractors. By the 1990s, Heston had stopped making stock hands. But the concept of a self-compressing, ready-to-use hay stack, that's still used in some operations, and the modern big square baler making 800-pound compressed rectangular bales is essentially a direct descendant. Number 4. The Steiger Panther III. In 1974, North Dakota's Steiger tractor, named after founder brothers Douglas and Maurice Steiger, launched the Panther III. It was a huge articulated 4WD tractor that came in multiple configurations, producing from 225 to over 300 horsepower, powered by Caterpillar or Cummins diesels. What made the Panther III special was how it was built. Instead of using proprietary parts like the big companies did, Steiger used off-the-shelf components, truck engines, truck transmissions, and heavy-duty axles designed for the construction industry. This meant farmers could actually get it repaired at any truck shop. It was a tractor built the way farmers wanted, big, simple, and serviceable. Steiger was eventually bought by Tenneco in 1986 and merged into Case IH, where the Steiger name lives on today. But the original Panther III and its sibling the Bearcat and Tiger fundamentally changed the economics of large-scale wheat farming across the Great Plains. A single Panther III could do the work of 3 smaller tractors, and a farmer could actually afford to repair it himself. That was genuinely revolutionary, and most people today have never heard of Steiger outside of Red River Valley collectors. Number 3. The Big Bud 747. In 1977 in Havre, Montana, a small manufacturer called Northern Manufacturing Company built the biggest farm tractor ever made. It was designed by Wilbur Hensler, built by Ron Harmon and his crew, and cost $300,000. They called it the Big Bud 747, named after the Boeing 747 because of its incredible size. Let me give you the numbers. 27 feet long, 20 feet wide, 14 feet tall. Custom 8-foot-tall tires made by the United Tire Company of Canada. It was powered by 2 combined Detroit diesel 8x92T engines, creating a 16-cylinder power plant, producing 760 horsepower, later upgraded to 900, then 1,100 horsepower. Fully fueled with its 1,000-gallon tank, it weighed 100,000 pounds, ballasted 135,000 pounds. The Big Bud 747 was built for a specific customer, the Rossi brothers, cotton farmers from Bakersfield, California. They used it for deep ripping, loosening hard pan soil up to 20 inches deep on their 20,000-acre farm for 11 years. After that, it went to Willowbrook Farms in Florida. In 1997, the Williams brothers of Big Sandy, Montana brought it home to Montana, where it could pull an 80-foot cultivator at 8 miles per hour, covering 1.3 acres per minute. There was only ever one Big Bud 747. When United Tire went bankrupt in 2000, replacement tires became impossible to get. It was sidelined in 2009, displayed in museums, until 2020 when Goodyear created new custom LSW tires for it. Today, it's considered the world's largest operational farm tractor. And ironically, in 2023, Ron Harmon restarted Big Bud production at age 78, proving that even a forgotten machine can have a second act. And the Big Bud 747's cab was just as impressive as the engine. It had air conditioning, a heater, windshield wipers, a swivel bucket seat, plus a buddy seat for passengers, an AM/FM radio, and, this is where you know it's from, 1977, an 8-track stereo system. The original design was genius. Instead of using expensive proprietary parts, Ron Harmon's team built the Big Bud from off-the-shelf truck components. Truck engines, truck transmissions, heavy-duty axles, all of it designed to be serviceable by any farmer or mechanic with basic tools. The cab even tilted backwards to allow access to the transmission for quick repairs. When Welker Farms, a popular YouTube channel documenting modern American farming, restored another Big Bud and outfitted it with new Titan LSW 1400 tires, it became an internet sensation. Today, the Big Bud 747 is still owned by the Williams brothers of Big Sandy, Montana, and sometimes still works fields pulling an 80-foot cultivator. In an era of consolidating machinery giants and increasingly proprietary technology, the Big Bud 747 stands as a monument to what happens when a small shop in Montana decides to just build the biggest, simplest, most bulletproof machine possible and then let it rip. Number 2. The Ford FW60. In 1977, Ford Tractor introduced the FW60, along with the FW20, FW30, and FW40 as their first attempt at a big, American-made, articulated 4WD tractor. The FW60 produced 335 horsepower from a Cummins V8 diesel and weighed over 33,000 pounds. Here's why it was forgotten. Ford didn't actually build the FW series in their own factories. They contracted with the Steiger Tractor Company to build them. Steiger built the tractors, Ford painted them blue and slapped a Ford badge on them. It was basically a rebadged Steiger, and Ford's own tractor division wasn't really invested in it. Production ended in 1982 when Ford decided to focus on smaller row-crop tractors. But the FW60 pioneered something important: electronic monitoring. It had a then-advanced monitoring system that could detect PTO speed, hydraulic pressure, engine temperature, and other parameters, displaying warnings to the operator. In an era where most tractors had 3 analog gauges, the FW60 was running rudimentary onboard computers. That was the seed of what would eventually become modern precision farming. Today's tractors are running full Linux computers with GPS, yield mapping, and automatic steering. The FW60 hinted at that future before disappearing into obscurity. Number 1. The Case IH 9150, 9170, 9180 Magnum. In 1987, Case IH unveiled the 9150, the first in what would become the 9100 series Magnum articulated four-wheel drive tractors. By 1988, the series included the 9170 and 9180. What made them number 1 on this list is that they were the first mass-production tractors with genuinely modern electronic controls. The 9170 produced 235 horsepower. The 9180 produced 300. They had power-shift transmissions where the operator could shift through gears without using a clutch. They had electronic engine management. They had sophisticated hydraulic load sensing systems that automatically adjusted flow based on what implement was attached. And they had full cab environments with air conditioning, air suspension seats, and dash-mounted electronic displays. But here's the forgotten part. The 9100 series Magnums were also the first tractors built with future-proofing for precision agriculture. Case IH engineers knew GPS-based farming was coming. They designed the 9100s with ports and pre-wiring to support GPS, yield monitors, and auto-steer systems that wouldn't even be commercially available until the mid-1990s. When GPS farming finally took off around 1996 to 1997, the 9100 Magnums were among the very few tractors in use that could be retrofitted without major modifications. So yes, every modern John Deere 9R, Case IH Quadtrac, New Holland T9, and Fendt 1000 series tracks its lineage partially back to these machines. The tractor you see spraying your local cornfield today with satellite-guided precision? Its great-grandfather was the Case IH 9180. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, drop a comment telling me which of these 25 machines blew your mind the most. And if you learned something new today, hit that subscribe button, because next week I'm diving into 20 vintage farm implements that farmers swore were impossible to break. See you then.